That's a bit cool. Okay, hi everybody, and welcome along to our class called 8 Verses to Turn Your Mind Around. This is the second week, and we can begin by doing a short breathing meditation. We'll set our motivation, say a few prayers together, and then we can begin the class. So please get comfortable in your seat. So this means that your back is straight and your shoulders are relaxed. And you can keep your eyes open or close them, whichever feels more comfortable. And please place your hands wherever you like. Now, whether your eyes are open or closed, you are breathing normally and naturally. And as you're breathing normally and naturally, you'll notice movements taking place in the body. These will often be in the upper chest or the lower abdomen. But wherever they're taking place, I want you to focus upon them and just acknowledge that there is movement taking place whenever you inhale breath or exhale breath. And while you are breathing normally and naturally, the body is beginning to relax and the mind is focused. And while the mind is focused, it's easy to imagine the appearance of Shakyamuni Buddha and his spiritual entourage appearing in the space above you. The body of the Buddha is shining golden light. And these light rays illuminate the space around you to reveal that you're surrounded by all sentient beings. And you are leading all these beings in the process of taking refuge. And you say, I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. You've taken refuge in the Buddha and recited this prayer. to put an end to your suffering and to bring about the highest states of happiness for yourself and for all the beings surrounding you. And in response to this prayer of yours, lights and nectars pour out of the heart of the Buddha and wash over you and over all the beings surrounding you. And if you have any obstacles to your faith and devotion to the three jewels, these are all washed away. And the mind is clear, vast, and open. And you are reminded of all the beings who surround you, and you wish them to have the immeasurable, boundless thoughts of compassion, love, joy, and equanimity. So you make this prayer. May all sentient beings have happiness and its causes. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and its causes. May all sentient beings never be separated from the happiness that is without suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from the bias of attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. And again, lights and nectars pour out of the heart of the Buddha. They wash over you and over all the beings surrounding you. And these four immeasurable thoughts are revealed to be just qualities or reflections of the mind's nature. And they effortlessly manifest. And you recollect the field of merit above you, and devotion arises once again. And you say, reverently I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind. I present clouds of every type of offering, actual and imagined. I declare all my negative actions accumulated since beginning this time, and rejoice in the merit of all holy and ordinary beings. Please remain until the end of cyclic existence and turn the wheel of Dharma for living beings. I dedicate my own and others' merits to the great enlightenment. Now, to stop us clinging to this merit, to have any intrinsic existence, we recollect emptiness and transform our body to take on the aspect of the universe itself. And we're going to give this away to the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas in front of us. So we say, this ground, anointed with perfume, strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, 4 continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha field and offer it. May all living beings enjoy this pure land. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kamnaryatayami. And we release this offering, and it's accepted by the Buddha, and he looks down at us and smiles with delight. And we look up at him, and we look into his eyes, and we see that we're accepted, and we feel at ease. And then from the heart of the Buddha, a small emanation of himself moves through space and comes to abide above the crown of your head. The emanation descends, coming down through your head, down through your body, and rests at the level of your heart. And then its radiance begins to expand, filling your body and mind with light. And the light goes out through the pores of your skin and begins to fill the 10 directions of space. When all directions are filled with light, all sentient beings who exist within space have been touched by this light and utterly transformed into the fully awakened state. And you acknowledge that there's no difference between yourself and others. In fact, even these terms have completely vanished. And then the light begins to withdraw from the 10 directions of space, and it re-enters your heart. And you find yourself breathing normally and naturally, embodied, sitting on a seat, and you're breathing normally and naturally. And you know this meditation was done purely on the level of imagination and has left an imprint upon your mind, a cause for the effect to take place, full enlightenment for the benefit of others. So that's wonderful. It's wonderful I've been able to do this. And you breathe in through your nostrils, and you exhale through your mouth, and you allow your eyes to flutter open. And you move your body in whichever way you like until you feel quite comfortable at ease again while you're in your seat. Okay, so welcome again back to our class, and we'll begin today's presentation. So today we're going to do a brief review of what we did last week. I'm going to summarize it by having a look at the two verses together and a verse that might also help to summarize it all. And today we're going to look at verses 3 and 4 of these 8 verses. The verse 3 really is focused on the development or the development and ongoing use of mindfulness and vigilance. And verse 4 is really dealing with empathy and compassion, how to cultivate these two qualities whenever you come into contact with people you consider difficult. Now, the books haven't changed at all. So these are the books we had up last week, and they're the same ones this week. And so all of these books here have commentaries on this particular text called 8 Verses for Training the Mind. It is, the basis for this class. So I'm going to put up a slide now, and this is the sort of the summary of what we did last week. And I'll sort of explain a little bit about the slide itself and why I've put it up like this. So you can see when we look down here, we've got the practices, and we go across the practice in the first verse and the practice in the second verse. And then it's just like, how is this verse related to wishing bodhicitta, or the mind that wishes to develop the goal of achieving enlightenment for the benefit of others? Because to achieve this goal, as you probably are aware of, there's a number of ways of training yourself. So the one way is called the 6 causes and 1 effect, and the other is called equalizing and exchanging self with others. So we sort of learn those individually, and then we combine them, and then we practice them in an 11-step process. So when you go across here, it's like, this is one of the steps. equalizing self with others, and the goal is to develop empathy and compassion towards others. And then we're going to come down and say, so what are we to do here? Well, in the first verse was talking about appreciating the kindness and preciousness of others. And so we develop a sense of gratitude towards them. And by understanding their needs, we know these people are suffering, they actually wish to be happy. I'm going to try and help them do that. The way to do that, we've actually got to stop being just preoccupied with ourselves. So this is the faulty attitude. And this here is also a step on that you'll find in the 11 steps of training. And all of these trainings, so here we've got like the causes to develop this wishing bodhicitta. And once we've done that, we end up actually engaging in the practices. And how you engage in them is in what they call the perfections. So we have the perfection of patience here, and in the second verse, the perfection of ethics. So I thought I'd like put up this, so if you wanted to remind yourself what the teachings are about, it's all very contained in this way. And you can quickly see, okay, so when I go through, if I come to the second one here, it's related to equalizing self with others. I see it's about developing empathy and compassion. So where is that in these trainings? You see, that's the 5th step. So that 5th step depends upon the 4 that came before it and any of the preliminary trainings. Do you have any questions about what I've said? Does this seem to be reasonable to you? Can you sort of make sense of it?
Eddie, can you just go through like line by line, like the wishing bodhicitta, verse 1, verse 2, or,
Well, here we've got verse 1, so it's about cherishing others. And we cherish others because we understand their needs and about how kind they've been to us. The verse itself is related to, the practices are related to equalizing self with others and the development of empathy and compassion. To do that, we have to appreciate the kindness and the preciousness of others and have a sense of gratitude towards them. To do that, we've got to stop being preoccupied with ourselves. So this sense of preoccupation, or what they call self-cherishing, that's what we've got to put aside, because it will hinder the empathy. And all of this is related to the 3rd perfection of patience, because we definitely need patience to do something like this, because we're most familiar with this faulty attitude of always being preoccupied with others. So when we try to switch it around and work for the sake of others, it's not easy. So we need to be sort of like patient with ourselves, patient with the other, and patient with our understanding of how these teachings and us are related to one another. When we come to the second verse, the major thing is like how to enhance the love that cherishes others. But again, this is related to equalizing self with others, so we have to develop a sense of empathy and compassion. But here you can see it's a little bit different. We can see that here the major thing about the verse is how to cultivate respect for others. So we're building up on seeing that others are kind and precious. We've developed a sense of gratitude towards them. Now we've got to develop a sense of humility. What will get in the way of that is our own egocentricity. And the verse was really looking at the deluded forms of pride, in particular arrogance, because this will overcome the humility. And this is again related to another perfection, but this time it's the perfection of ethics. So the ethics here is the ethics of the bodhisattva vehicle. Not only are we not to harm others, but we need to stop this idea of egocentricity overwhelming us, and then from that basis, developing things like arrogance, anger, and so forth. So Miffy, you going
It
to say
just
something
really
else?
strikes me how amazing that, you know, the verses are so short, and yet like all of this is contained in them,
Yeah,
which
and that's
is,
what I want. That's why I've sort of put this up. So I wanted to draw that out, and
yeah,
also so that you understand that um, it's a process. So when you have something like equalizing self and others with up here in terms of wishing bodhicitta, you've got to remember that's a stage of practice. So there's a lot of stuff that came before it. So if you find it difficult to have empathy for others, um, you should understand, of course, I have difficulty because there's a lot of stuff I haven't done before that to actually have empathy. And I'll show you very shortly, the stuff that you need to do before you actually have this empathy and compassion. Now, in summary, Ari Shanti Davis says, look, this is where I've got to end up with, right? So when my eyes behold limited beings, so limited beings means anyone who's not enlightened, I shall think, depending on them, I shall attain Buddhahood and look towards them with a sincere and loving manner. So in brief, this verse sums up the previous two. What should come through this is that the kindness, the preciousness of others, and if we can acknowledge that and wish to really help them, we can actually attain Buddhahood. So now the actual class will actually begin now. So this was a review of last week. So again, I'm going to put up verses 3 and 4, and I'm going to summarize them straight away. And then I'm going to go into each one of them individually and then put up the summary at the end. That might help us sort of retain some of the information. And I wanted to summarize at the beginning so you get a big overview of it. And then we can dive into it into a bit more depth. So here we have the steps that are taken to develop what we call this wishing bodhicitta. And I've put this up here so that you can see that things like cherishing others or equalizing self with others are highly dependent upon what came before them. So when we have this really wish to attain enlightenment, to benefit others, we begin with the first step, which is called immeasurable equanimity. And the point of doing that is to remove any bias that we have towards others and to balance the sort of reactivity that we have towards others in all sort of social occasions. We go on from that, we recognize all living beings as part of our family. Often they say, recognize all sentient beings as being your mother, but it could also be your father, your brother, your sister, your child. And the point of doing something like that is to have a sense of commonality and solidarity with one another. The third step is to remember the kindness of others. And that brings about this sense of gratitude. So this is like the first verse, right? Gratitude. Then we have to make this wish to repay their kindness. So we reciprocate with affection towards the affection they gave us and their kindness. The fifth step, here we have what they call equalizing self with others. And we're seeing the sameness of self and others. And what we have the sameness is here, a wish to be happy, a wish to avoid suffering. So we have empathy towards others and towards ourselves. What always gets in the way of developing the mind that focuses on others and makes them precious to us is our own egocentricity. And there are massive disadvantages to egocentricity. But if we recollect what these disadvantages are, it can bring up upon what these two great minds, one called the mind of renunciation, where we wish to put aside all the causes of suffering and replace them with compassion. The seventh step is this, looking at the kindness of others and cherishing them. So here we develop a sense of affectionate love. The eighth step is the exchange of self for others. This is really to develop courage. The ninth step is a step called the taking suffering. So this now we're coming to what they call the giving and taking part, called Tonglen. And again, it's to develop a sense of courageous compassion and selfless love. The 10th step is to have this wholehearted resolve to do it, to be really firm, thinking, there's nothing else really to do with my life. This seems to be the most valuable thing I can do. And so I'm going to do it. So this way we have a sense of responsibility and we give our life purpose. And finally we end up with this, what we call radical altruism, or the mind of enlightenment itself. And that calls for action on our part. So as we go through the other verses here, when we come up to things like, this practice is associated with exchanging self with others, like the last two slides, right? The last two verses were associated with exchanging self with others. So we come along here, we go, oh, that's this 8th stage. Wow, that's quite far along in terms of the 11 steps. So exchanging self with others is dependent upon the 7 steps that came before it. Plus your knowledge of the suffering of cyclic existence, your knowledge of karma, your knowledge of death and impermanence, your knowledge of fortunate human rebirth, your knowledge of dependent upon a teacher, and so forth.
So,
Eddie,
Eddie,
yes.
what happens if you get the steps out of order? Like many times, when we're trying to just develop just everyday compassion, we don't start with equanimity at all. We
No,
start with just the one person in front of us.
yeah. So you'll always find that your practice will always be hindered, or obstructions will arise. You could maybe be able to do it for somebody really close to you, but then if you're a neighbor or a stranger behaves in an unexpected way, then you can't do it. So that's not a bad thing. That's actually a good thing, because it tells you actually where you are, and that you'll know. Of course I wasn't able to do it because I haven't actually done it in the order. I haven't developed any sort of strength here with my practice, because I'm still a learner, and I haven't sort of become methodical in using this knowledge. So a lot of this material here, the way I've used some of the terms, have all come from what I think is quite a wonderful practice story. He certainly presents a lovely course, a guy called Miles Neal. So he really comes from a psychological perspective in terms of presenting the Buddhist path. So you get sort of different terms used. But these terms really resonate with me. So I sort of thought, well, they might with you too. And so that's why
I,
I
I
share this.
really like number 11, radical altruism. I think that's a great term because it is. It's shockingly radical in our modern age.
Yeah, yeah. And this, the reciprocity of affection. Others have been affectionate towards us, we can be affectionate towards them. Okay, so this is like if you go through these stages here, the final thing you come with is radical altruism and the action. This is up to there. This is what they call the mind of enlightenment. So that's the bodhicitta. Okay, so once you have this radical altruism, go, well, how do what do I do? Because this is all to bring about the wish to have to become a Buddha to benefit others. And once it's got down to here, it's sort of, it doesn't require all these stages of thinking. You're there. You're there. But like I said, once you're there, well, how do you behave? And that's where that last one I put down is you engage in what they call the perfections. Wishing bodhicitta and what are the two terms that anybody remember? There's wishing bodhicitta and engaging bodhicitta. So how do we use that? Once we've got bodhicitta by going through these 11 stages, how do we engage with that attitude? What are the actions we engage in? So that takes us to that next step of the perfections. And you'll see that each of the perfections is also related to the verse that we go through. So let's have a look at those verses. But before we do, finally, is there any questions that anybody has on these 11 points that help to inspire us to become awakened for the benefit of others?
I have another question about these. Do these 11 points, they relate to all of the verses or just some of the verses or some points to some verses?
No, so wherever the points come from the verse, I'll say, oh, this is related to exchanging self for others.
Okay.
Well, what you take away from is there are 7 points that came before it.
Yep.
But that's how the
Okay.
relationship is.
Yep.
So 1 point contains all the previous ones.
Anna has a question here. The second group of 11 points, so that second column, are they the perfections?
No, here are just other ways of sort of saying, when we have immeasurable equanimity, like for instance the first one, what the purpose of that is to remove bias and balance our social reactivity. By recognizing all beings as family, we're generating a sense of commonality and solidarity with everybody. When we remember the kindness of others, it's to generate within us a sense of gratitude. So it's like if you want to repay their kindness, you do it by being kind. Okay, so let's go look and have a look at these two verses coming up 3 and 4. And like I said, I've just summarized them first, and then we can have a look into it more depth.
Lorraine had
her hand.
Lorraine had her hand up.
Okay, Lorraine.
Yes, thank you. I apologize for my voice. I'm very congested. I had a question about renunciation because it's something that is very imperative to my state of mind right now. Yeah. But my state of mind is also it just fluctuates a lot. I'm just kind of going through a lot of mental things. So to bring me back to that point of renunciation, are there any mantras or any suggestions that can help me get me back in the state of mind of renunciation?
Okay, so what do you understand by the mind of renunciation?
And Eddie, just stop the share for a moment.
Okay.
Well, what do I understand about the mind of renunciation? Yeah. Well, it's imperative to me to renounce the way of thinking that I've had before that is causing destructive patterns. And but those destructive patterns, they've been going on for a long time, so they keep coming back. So just trying to find a way to get back to the point of renunciation and stay there.
Okay, so you're experiencing different forms of suffering, and it's sort of a habitual. It comes back often. So the renunciation.
Yes, I'm experiencing
sorry,
for
right?
Probably. Sorry, I'm having a hard time with the delay. Yes, I've been through meditation, discovered some patterns that go back as long as I can remember.
Okay, and so in renunciation in terms of these patterns, so you recognize the pattern, you know that this pattern causes suffering, and what you want to do is to stop engaging with that pattern. So that's renunciation. Because you understand it's the patterning, and my engagement with it causes suffering. I don't wish to experience the suffering, so I've got to stop engaging with the pattern. And just as you said, Lorraine, all you have to, simple way to do it is just, as soon as you see that your mind is going into the pattern, stop right there and do something else. So as you said, so you engage in the mantra, or any mantra. So if you're doing the mantra, you can't engage in the pattern. So there is an activity of renunciation. Now that engaging in that pattern, as you understand, has not stopped the cause. The cause still remains. That's why you can keep going back into the pattern. But you have a temporary cessation of suffering because you're doing something else. You're not in the pattern. So that's good. You keep keep finding anything that you can do that will work on a temporary level and move your mind across that way. Also understand that from this perspective, this thought transformation perspective or mind training perspective, the major cause of suffering here is this sense of being preoccupied with ourselves. Or in other words, being preoccupied with the pattern, your previous pattern. That's where the suffering is coming from. So when you move across to the mantra, don't do it just for yourself, because it's just another way of being self-obsessed. Do it for yourself, but do it for everyone else too. And any other technique that you can find, all you've really got to do is just move your mind away from the habit of engaging in these patterns. And do something else. If it's reciting mantras and they work for you and you're comfortable with doing that, do that. If it's to consider the kindness of others, do that. If you want to remember your teacher, do that. And I hope that's useful for you. But that's basically at this level where we are, that's how it sort of works.
Yes, it's very helpful. Thank you.
Okay, Lorraine. Okay, is there anything else from anybody? Okay, we'll come back then. Okay, so where's our next one? So here we have these, again, a summary verses 3 and 4. So the first verse is like watching the mind to drive out the afflictions. Now, like I said, all these afflictions that we're going to come across, they're all rooted in this sense of self-preoccupation or egocentricity, where I am the most important person. That is driven from something behind it called ego-grasping ignorance, the root of all of our suffering. And in this first verse here, it's related to the exchange of self with others. And so what we've got to do to stop these afflictions is to cultivate mindfulness, meaning you need to remember what to do. You need to remember stuff, either about the afflictions or their antidotes, and be vigilant about this. So in terms of the previous example, so you can be vigilant and go, oh, here I am, I'm slipping into my patterns of previous thought. This is going to produce suffering for me. Oh, I don't want to do that. Mindfulness, I remember what to do, the mantra. So you recite the mantra. So what have we got to stop? This sense of egocentricity, the preoccupation with our previous habits. We've got to stop agreeing with and going along with patterns that produce suffering. This is a sense of renunciation. And it's related to the perfection of concentration, because you've got to have a concentrated mind to do this. When we come to verse 4, we're going to be looking at how to cultivate the wishing love and to deepen compassion. So again, you can see it's related to exchanging self with others, but it's also related to the cherishing of others. So here's quite interesting, because the previous two verses were equalizing self with others, and now we've come to exchanging self with others. So verses 3 and 4, we're sort of upping the ante. It's a little bit more difficult to practice. So to cultivate this wishing love requires a sort of empathy with others. The empathy towards others comes about through a reflection upon our own suffering. We recognize, my gosh, others are no different than I am. I'm suffering and so are they. And just as I want to put an end to my own, because we're the same, I should want to put an end to yours. So this is the compassion. It's not just recognizing or having empathy. You've got to act on it. Now, what's going to stop us acting on it for the sake of others is our sense of self-preoccupation. So self-preoccupation, egocentricity, self-cherishing, they all just sort of mean the same. And out of it comes all the different other afflictive mental states. And in this particular verse, the mental states they're concerned with really revolve around anger. So I've put in, we're not often, we may not be all that often angry, but we may be discontent. And discontent can lead to resentment, and then resentment can lead to anger. So these mental states are all associated with anger in some way. And what really goes against that whole idea is this perfection of joyous effort. So this is associated with that perfection, that when we see others suffering and wish to put an end to it, that's a sense, you should have a sense of joy in that, because it's going completely against your sense of self-preoccupation, your usual habit responses. And by helping another, you help yourself. Every time you help somebody, it's really good for you. Every time you hurt somebody, it's very bad for you. So that's sort of like a brief overview and summary of what we're going to go into next. So we begin by looking at verse 3. We see it's related to exchanging self with others, and we're really looking here at the cultivation of what mindfulness and vigilance is. And Geshe Langri Tangpa says, during all my activities, I will probe my mind. So this is a sense of vigilance. See, what is my mind actually doing? Is it doing what I wanted to? Is it doing what I remember? Like being mindful. He says, well, look, if it's not, as soon as an affliction arises, I'll know it has. And I understand it endangers me and others. So I'm going to train myself to confront it whenever it does, and I'm going to get right at it. I'm going to avert it. During all my activities. So our next slide is going to have a look at these activities. What are all our activities? So our activities can be, or whatever they are, can just basically put into like 4. And these 4 are, when you're lying down, an affliction might arise. And when it does, you're going to have to go, oh, this is no good. This is going to hurt me or someone else. If it hurts someone else, it'll hurt me. It can happen when you're lying down, or it can happen when you're sitting, or it can happen when you're standing, or it can happen when you're walking. So these are the 4 major activities. So you need to sort of, relax and just sort of keep doing any of these things, but know what's going on with your mind. Miffy, yes.
Yeah, so, with lying down, sometimes depression can come over you when you if you're really tired, you're lying down and everything kind of collapses in. So is depression an affliction, or is it a result of an affliction, or
Well,
is
I
it?
think you instead of asking that, it's like ask yourself, you're vigilant about it, right? So you've understood, oh, I'm feeling depressed. There's a sense of depression going on. Okay, so is this really good for me? Does this really help me, this being depressed, help others? Yeah. So if your answers are no, then you're going to go, now I've got to recall my mindfulness. So what do I have to do here when I feel like this? What do I need to remember?
And that's the real challenge, to actually uh, remember. Kind of, it's like when you're least likely to remember is when you most have to remember.
Yeah, and the lovely thing about this is what you can do is use the afflictions to help you remember. It's like every time you come into one and say, oh, now I have to remember the opposite. So that's why they can be quite useful. You take them as to be teachers. They're teaching you how to improve your life, how to improve the way you use your mind. So then you come to the mindfulness, and you've got to remember, okay, so what do I have to remember here? And you go, well, the opponent. I can see that by having this sense of when I'm depressed, I'm preoccupied with myself. So what's the antidote to that? And you'll know, oh, the opposite is start being concerned with others.
Yeah.
And so you might think, for instance, while you're having the depression, my God, there's so many people who are depressed in the world.
Yeah, well, that's what I managed to do, is to think, well, at a minimum, it's like 1 in 10 people, which means, at least 2 people in each class that I'm in are clinically depressed, and odds are one's even more unhappy than me. So my people.
Yeah, that's right. And then say sort of like, but at least I know what to do when I'm depressed. And so many other people don't. Right? So you feel a little bit better. You have an antidote. You know what to do. And you start moving the mind away from self and start considering others. And that's one of the major antidotes. So like it's like that we use these 2 mental factors called mindfulness and vigilance. So I'm going to talk about those now and basically just say what I've just said. So here we've got these, what they call, I'm saying they're 2 necessary elements to deal with any type of positive mental state to work against states of mind that produce suffering. You have to be vigilant and you have to know what to do. So knowing what to do is this mindfulness. You remember the faults of the the negative mental state. You remember the faults. If I'm like this, like I said with Miffy, if I know that I'm depressed and I keep this way, what's going to happen to me? You say, well, it's going to get worse and worse. I'll just become more depressed. That's one of the faults of depression. If I'm like, I can't help myself, I can't help others. So you've got to remember, these are the faults. So what do I have to do? And then you remember, the antidote to them. And that requires a sense of vigilance. The vigilance goes, my God, I'm actually feeling like this. And that's not useful. There's something else I could do. And then the mindfulness goes, yep, there is something else you could do. These are the things you could do. Do those now and your mind will change. Now here the question is like, so what do we need to be mindful of? What do we need to be mindful of, and what are we vigilant about in relationship to this verse? So what we've got to remember here is that others are precious and kind. We remember what we learned in the first 2 verses. And we're vigilant about that. If the mind's gone off somewhere else and we're thinking something cruel or resentful towards others, we've got to go, oh my gosh, I've slipped off this. I've actually, sentient beings are really precious and kind to me. And I should have a sense of humility when I'm in their company. But actually, my mind is not doing that. Oops. What should it do? Focus on the kindness.
Don't forget
Focus
to
on,
stop the
actually, if
screen
you
every
thought
now and
well of
again.
them, you could become enlightened. And by thinking poorly of them, I'm just causing more suffering for myself. Miffy? Yep.
Eddie, don't forget to stop.
Yep. Okay. So do you guys get this in terms of the mindfulness and the vigilance? So if you find, like I said, if you find yourself lying down or sitting down, and then you start thinking of sentient beings in a way that is not kind, in ways that are not recollecting their kindness and what the great benefits for yourself. Your vigilance has recognized this, going, oh my God, I'm not doing what I've understood. Then you've got to go, I've got to go back to what I understood.
Eddie, there's a question in the chat.
Yep, so I saw, so Anna asked something. What was the question, Anna, please? Oh, in the chat? Could somebody read it out?
What if you don't know what the causes are? Would you be
Okay.
removing your attention away from trying to find the causes of these
No.
experiences?
When we all begin like that, Anna, we don't know the causes. Right? So then we're introduced to the causes. So that's what we've got to remember. We go, the causes of my suffering are the ignorance that misapprehends things in a false way. So I believe myself to exist in a way that is false. It's not true. The ignorance that presents everything to me in a true way when it's actually false. And then all the habit patterns that come out of that. One of the major habit patterns is this habit pattern called self-preoccupation, egocentricity. So when you get that, you go, okay, so that's what I know. But you know that by checking it. You don't just go, oh, Eddie said it, or I read that in a Buddhist book, or my teacher said it. It's like, that's great you said it, but is it true? So you have to work that out and go until you can go, it's true. Then you can come out to go to the self-cherishing part of the sense of self-preoccupation and go, so what comes out of that? And the texts say, all the disturbing emotions. Then you would ask, what are they? These disturbing emotions. Then you come up with, they are anger. So you go, is that true? What are the benefits of being angry? What are the faults? How about pride? What is the benefits of being deluded about who you are, and the faults? So we need to ask these sort of questions and to become certain ourselves that we agree. Yes, when I've become angry, it's always hurt me. So we develop a sort of what we did call certainty about this information, about what they call the Buddha Dharma. And then we
Eddie,
apply it.
in some way, this is kind of like it's a really good go-to of if we can't find, is it jealousy or pride or this or that, if we go straight to the core of the matter, which is that self-preoccupation and neglecting others, then we know that's going to be a cause.
That's right. And this is what they're sort of getting at this level of the teachings. It all comes back to this, because I say if you can work against the self-preoccupation, the egocentricity, all the other disturbing emotions, it's like getting to the one that where everything's coming out of it. It's sort of like I was just holding my hands up, you got these 5 fingers here. You go, there's anger, there's desirous attachment, there's pride. And you knock down pride, but there's the 4 others there, right? Then you work at the anger and the pride comes back up. Right? Versus if you get at the whole hand all together, which is this self-cherishing attitude, the sense of egocentricity we have, all the fingers go down.
Time is ticking on.
Yep, it is. So I better tick on too. Okay, so that's the sort of mindfulness. The mindfulness, you're just sort of So in the Lamrim Chenmo it says, look, two things are needed. A technique in which your attention is not distracted from whatever it had as its original object of meditation. So the original object of meditation is here for us, the kindness of sentient beings, how precious they are, and that we need to be humble in their presence. That's what we've got to remember. That's the thing. Vigilance tells you whether you're actually thinking that way. Are you holding people like that? Vigilance tells you. If you're not, you've got to come back, be vigilant, come back. Oh, hang on a minute. These people, they're all so kind to me. In dependence upon them, I can achieve enlightenment. The thing that'll stop me doing that is thinking I'm better than them, the sense of arrogance and pride. I need to be humble in the face of others, in the company of others. You keep, that's what we call meditation. You keep bringing the mind back, placing it on its object. The object is the kindness of sentient beings, how rare and precious they are, how they can bring us to enlightenment itself. So just in brief now, we'll have a look at each of these in a little bit more depth, but not much. So this nature of mindfulness, right? Regarding a familiar object, your mind is not forgetful. It operates without distraction. So the familiar object here is sentient beings who have been kind to us and whom we could become Buddhas if we could just recollect their kindness and repay it. We don't forget this. Your mind is not forgetful and it operates without distraction. So if you look at how we are right now, I, for instance, will often forget this. And then you can go through and go, well, why do you keep forgetting it, Eddie? And you go, well, because this practice was dependent upon a whole lot of stages of practice before it. And you haven't done any of those really well. So there's no need to get upset with yourself. It's just the mind just hasn't the capacity yet. And if you wanted to have the capacity, you've got to sort of work backwards and go, where am I actually at? That's where I have to start. So I put this particular picture up because when you look at this baby, she's a little unusual appearing, isn't she? And that's because she has an illness that came about through mosquitoes.
Is that the Zika virus?
Yeah. And yet this man, here's the familiar object, his baby, loves it, loves his child. It doesn't ever forget. Just as you wouldn't have, if any of you have had children, you wouldn't have forgotten, right? You love your children. You don't get distracted from it.
Yeah, and you wouldn't go, oh, who are you?
No, that's right. This is the sentient being that I love. So it's like that. And vigilance is, knowing whether the mind is getting distracted or it's dull. And the purpose of this vigilance is to always assess your mental situation. So, so sentient beings, we're surrounded by sentient beings. So there's Yvette and Barbara sitting right next to each other. And then you can say, well, what's my mental situation in relationship to Barbara? Or Barbara might think this about Yvette, So you say, wow, so it depends upon our relationship. I could become enlightened. She's really kind to me. It's that sort of thing, because we might find, well, I'm not actually doing that. My mind's gone dull. It might be the case, but it's not something I'm thinking about. I just think she's just there. Then we can say, is excitement occurring? So that means we sort of get completely distracted and we move off onto something else. Like, for instance, if I just use Yvette and Barbara again as to illustrate this, you might suddenly feel yourself quite hungry. And, I've got to go up to the fridge or something, And you forget maybe to ask, Barb, would you like something to eat too? The excitement. And it's about me, my own preoccupation with my own food, my hunger. We forget, oh,
It's like you know it so well, Eddie.
yeah. Or is it sort of like I've become quite dull? You know, it's another sense of sort of forgetting in a way. So we can forget when we get very excited, or we can forget when we become dull. And so vigilance lets you know that, oh, my mind is getting like this. Oh, I notice that my affection for my partner or the other people, it's not there. It's been diminished in some way. I need to refresh it. Right? So we could either recite that verse to ourselves, we go, okay, you know, and then relate it to a person. So these two have to work together, mindfulness and vigilance. In fact, what they do, and you've got to get them to work together. So they work together like this. You maintain your focus on your chosen object, which is the sentient being who is suffering, and you know they want to be happy, and they're just like you, but this person has been incredibly kind to you, again and again. And then with mindfulness, you check, right? Is my mind dull or am I excited? Either way, I've sort of forgotten my relationship with this person. And the relationship is depends upon this person, I can attain enlightenment. So I want to do a quick meditation now on what we've just learned. So please, you don't need to close your eyes. It's just sort of reflect, if you like. You know, you're sitting there and you're going to think about what I'm going to say. So all of us are afflicted by different types of delusions. And each of these delusions has characteristics. So in general, do you know what these characteristics are? So you sort of go, what are the characteristics of a delusion? What in general are they? Now, if the mind is blank here, we can remind ourselves that the general characteristic of a delusion is to produce discomfort and harm. They're sort of rough states of mind. So let's just take a delusion then. When you feel arrogant or better than others, how do others appear to you? And if you are attached to others, if a mind of desirous attachment arises towards someone else, how does the other person appear to you? Are these appearances reliable? Are they always true? Do these appearances enhance your happiness? So what are the causes of these delusions? There is self-grasping ignorance. There is the mind of self-cherishing that we're calling egocentricity or self-preoccupation. And there's the habit patterns that spring from these two ideas, afflictive karma. These are the causes for delusion. In brief, we overestimate ourselves and the objects that interest us, or else we underestimate what we're not interested in. And these are disadvantageous states of mind. What are the disadvantages of being under the control of delusions? Firstly, I don't know what to do. I am, in a sense, incompetent. I can become irrational, and my self-confidence is temporarily lost. The calmness of mind that I previously had is ruined. Depression, anxiety, loss of friends, and personal suffering all come about when my mind is under the control of a delusion. So now I want you to decide that this is unacceptable, that you're going to stop that. So say to yourself, I'm not going to allow my mind to come under the control of delusions. I'm not going to allow my mind to come under the control of any delusion. And if a delusion arises in my mind, I'm going to immediately recognize it as such and apply an antidote. As soon as I recognize the delusion, I'm going to apply an antidote. I'm going to stop it. Because its only function is to cause me suffering. That is the function of a delusion. So if you've said this to yourself with any sort of conviction, allow a sense of, woohoo, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. There's no one else that can do it for us. Only we can do it. So I think, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. And then with a sense of, yeah, then breathe in deeply through your nostrils and exhale through your mouth and allow a sense of pride to arise. Legitimate pride here. Okay, so thank you everyone for engaging in that. Okay. So by saying this, we're going to confront and avert these delusions. So basically this means that you're going to apply an antidote so that they actually stop. And as we were saying this before, one of the antidotes could be just move your mind away from that delusion and recite mantras. But there's lots of ways, things you could do. Now, like I said, the major delusions are the delusions of self-cherishing here. So we need to see all this self-preoccupation, egocentricity. So there are faults. The really faulty minds causes us suffering. So we have to be determined to stop it. And there are basically 4 methods you can use for any delusion. So I wanted to say this because I use it myself all the time. It's very useful because there's so many things you could do. But if you just knock it down to 4, you could go through and say, well, I can do these 2, but I can't do those 2. But at least I know there's 4. So the first one is you use the antidote. So the antidote here for being self-preoccupied is to immediately switch the mind to focus on others. So you cherish others rather than this self-cherishing, self-preoccupied mind. So that's an antidote. If you found yourself really angry and then you forgot, oh, it's all about me, I'm really self-preoccupied here, you might go, what's the antidote to anger then? So ask being patient, having loving kindness. What's the antidote if I found I was really disdainful towards somebody? In fact, I was arrogant. What's the antidote to arrogance? You go, oh, it's humility. Or how do I become humble then? So you go, there's got to be things the other person knows more than I do. So this is what we call antidote. If it's attachment towards a person, you know you're only looking at the good qualities of the person, you're really focused on them, and you're giving them types of qualities that they don't actually have. You're sort of inflating their good qualities.
Expectations.
So you go, so what's the antidote to that? You might go, well, if it's persons and I'm generating lust towards them or desirous attachment, I've got to look at the ugly aspect of them. So this is the antidote. It's a direct sort of antidote. The other thing you can do is what they call the antidote of transformation. So that's when you look at this, what's going on in a different way. So here, this aspect of the teachings we're going through, it's really about mind transformation, training the mind to look at what's going on in a completely different way. So when we, for instance, like when we say, wow, I'm experiencing a lot of suffering, right? And we go, oh, what's the cause of that? And you go, self-cherishing. Oh, I've got to really cherish others. You know, the antidote? Instead of doing that, we say, wow, that's great. I'm so pleased to be experiencing this suffering. You know, well, why? Because what I'm experiencing, I think I've got everybody else's suffering too, and they are free of it. And I'm glad to be doing this. By doing this, I'm generating courage in the face of suffering. I'm developing compassion and love. That's tremendous. So all these trainings, what we're going is to lead you to that part of the path, because everything that came before it was the antidote for each little thing. But here we can step up and go, you know, when I experience suffering, I can't avoid it. It's actually happening to me. I can use that. I can grow my good qualities. I can grow compassion and love. I can become familiar with it. I can become courageous in the face of this. That's the second method. You go the opposite, the transformation. You can also take the suffering you experience as a path, but this is, can't talk about this, but basically just say this is highest yoga tantra. You take whatever takes place, it is very useful to you again. And lastly, we can use awareness itself. And that is when whatever's happening to you, if you're experiencing suffering itself, you gaze immediately at it, you put your full attention on it. And you're asking, you're just looking at it, where is this suffering? How does it exist? Who is the person experiencing it? And it just vanishes. So often what my suggestion is take what works. Take what works for you. But remember, in this section of the teachings that we're going through, we're really looking at the practice of transforming our attitude towards suffering. We're training in that. But we'll come to that in the next couple of weeks. Is there anything anybody would just like to say about this, about how we can confront and avert suffering? So we would see, like whenever this takes place, I'm going to confront it. We use our mindfulness and our vigilance to confront our suffering, either by putting in place an opposite, transforming it, taking it as path, or as awareness itself. I said, they're just the four. Go right across any type of teaching, any method, you can put them all into there. And in that way, we could apply an antidote. So in summary, Ari Shantideva says, all the joy the world contains came through wishing happiness for others. All the misery the world contains came from wanting pleasure for oneself. Is there need for lengthy explanation? Childish beings look out for themselves. Buddhas labor for the good of others. See the difference that divides them. What's our time? 1:15. Okay. So I had another little meditation here. Maybe I'll just say it very briefly. So again, sit comfortably in your seat. It's just a reflection. And it's just something I'd like you to consider. Think about like beginningless time, time without actually findable beginning. And your consciousness is just like that. It has no findable beginning. Well, throughout that beginningless time, with that beginningless consciousness, we have worked for our own purposes, trying to find happiness for ourselves and avoid suffering. What do we have to show for all of our efforts? We are still suffering. We still have an uncontrolled mind. We are still in samsara. Well, consider what might happen if you started caring about others. It is the opposite of what we've been doing. What would be the effects? And then breathe in deeply through your nostrils, exhale through your mouth, and that'll do. So in summary, the idea of this third verse is saying, look, keep an eye on your mind, and when afflictive mental states arise, you've got to drive them out. How do you do that? By cultivating mindfulness and vigilance. What will help you to do this, to keep reminding yourself of the disadvantages of allowing your mind to become afflicted. The worst thing that happens, or which always happens, is you suffer. So instead of, it's related to the practice of exchanging self with others, meaning we're going to exchange the self-concern that has always been about us, concern for self, and go, I'm going to change that and become concerned about others. So that's the exchange. And it's related to the perfection of concentration. You've got to sort of remember to do this. That requires a concentrated mind. Which leads us to the fourth verse, where he says here, when I encounter beings of unpleasant character, and those oppressed by intense negative karma and suffering, as though finding a treasure of precious jewels, I will train myself to cherish them, for they are so rarely found. So this verse and the previous one I took from a book of mind training by a Venerable Thupten Jinpa. And what I really liked, sorry, he's not a Venerable anymore, he's a lay person. But what I really liked it was this part here, I will train myself, because it does require training. We can't just read this material and think, oh, I have to do it. It won't work like that. It's a gradual process. And like I said, it all comes from what came before it. So I'm just going to break this down here. So what are these beings of unpleasant character? So there are people who have not accumulated a great deal of merit in the past. So these people have a lot of afflictions. You'll know them, right? They're the people who are angry, in depressive states. Their mind has overpowered them. They're hurting badly. And it impacts on their character and your relationship with them. So ill-tempered people, so forth. So that is all driven by what they call intense negative karma. So the habitual mental patterns that drive this behavior. Then it goes, those oppressed by intense suffering. This is referring to those people who might be oppressed by leprosy, very serious illnesses. And then I will train myself to cherish them, for they are so rarely found. So saying here, in relation to the precious jewel, did anybody find a precious jewel today? I haven't either. So you can see it's quite rare.
That's like being told, may you live in interesting times. Have you found your precious jewel today?
Yeah, that's right. That's what I'm sort of getting at.
Mm.
So it's not off. Yeah, I mean, of course these people exist, but then have you run into anybody today and had a very intense negative experience?
But
Probably
even
not.
Eddie, just the people oppressed by intense suffering,
Yeah,
I'm really ashamed, but often my first response will be to recoil because
of
you
course.
recoil from suffering. And then
That's
I
right.
just feel so badly that I've recoiled from like I just remember being at a school reunion and one of my schoolmates just grew up to be a crack addict. So she was there and she was skinny and her teeth were terrible and she looked a complete mess. And so everybody was avoiding her. And then
Yeah.
she came up to talk to me and I kind of avoided her. And at the same time, I'm going, what am I doing? But it was like it's just the automatic response.
Yeah, that's right. That's what I was sort of
Terrible.
saying. This is just where we are, and you can see it's going to take quite a lot to undo that. Yeah. And that's why I like that line. I will train myself. So you know, Miffy's example and examples we could relate to ourselves to go, yeah, of course I recall. I have no training to not do otherwise. So we don't need to become harsh at oneself. It's just the mind that is misleading us. It's the mind that's doing this. So this is really talking about this development of compassion and wishing to have more love towards this person. So here it's like we can ask ourselves, well, what is compassion actually? Well, here it's this first part means has the aspect of allaying suffering. It means you want to stop the suffering. So Miffy, in this instance, Miffy just gave, she could see the suffering, but she, from her side, she had no wish at all to stop the suffering, was unable to bring that wish up. So it's not just sympathy or empathy, it's wanting to stop it. And you know, how does that wanting to stop it comes out because you can actually see the helplessness in others who are overwhelmed by suffering. But for many of us, we don't know what to do, or the mind recoils. Now, the only thing that you might be able to do is to pray for them, is to wish that they be well. And that's really good because it all begins with the wish. Without the wish, nothing will happen, it'll just stay the same. So we try and work where we are. If we can do more and actually get out there and help, do something, great, go and do it. But if you can't, you know, you just go back. What can I do? So wish them well. I wish they weren't like that. I wish they weren't suffering so much. That's compassion right there. You want to have that thought. Now this thought depends upon love and kindness, on having a sense of love and concern towards the other person. And you can see, you know, that's in the first two verses.
And that's what I didn't have for that lady at the reunion because I didn't have that natural warmth or even a developed warmth. So then there wasn't any
Yeah,
space for compassion to arise.
no, that's right. That's exactly right. So I want to introduce you to now to three forms of love. The first is called affectionate love, and the second is called cherishing love, and the third is called wishing love. Now, none of these forms of love are the types of love that have attachment in or sexual desire or anything like that, right? It's just completely free of that. It's the different types of love. So, for example, wishing love comes from cherishing love comes from affectionate love. Affectionate love is the basis. So, as a little metaphor for this, so affectionate love is a mind unmixed with desirous attachment. It sees another person as pleasant, likable, or beautiful. Now, for example, when a mother looks at her children, she feels great affection for them and perceives them to be beautiful. no matter how they appear to other people. Yeah? So just like that picture before with the father with the child who'd been affected by the mosquito bites and looked a bit strange, no matter what other people think about that, he loves that child. He thinks his child is beautiful. That's the affectionate love. Because of the affectionate love, the mother or parent naturally feels the child to be precious and important. And this feeling is cherishing love. And because the parent cherishes the child, the parent sincerely wishes for them to be happy. And this is wishing love. So you see, we have the wishing love crop in the four immeasurables. It depends upon this process of generating greater and greater love that the compassion arises. The compassion is naturally expressed that way, but it needs that foundation of love. So it's not unusual that you don't have compassion for all people, because you think, well, of course I don't have these three forms of love supporting it.
This makes so much sense now. Like it, yeah, I can see where I've gone wrong and why it's been such a struggle to bring up compassion, because it doesn't have this as a basis.
We need basis. Okay, so again, let's have a very quick meditation now. So I want you to imagine that there's a homeless couple in front of you. And imagine that they're muttering obscenities at one another in front of a young child who's being held roughly by one of the parents. Take a moment to reflect on the disadvantages of egocentricity or self-preoccupation. Can you see a disadvantage of being self-preoccupied here? Can you see the faults of resentment and anger? Then think about the advantage of being patient, of being able to bear another person's suffering. The advantage of cherishing the other person. And I think by seeing this is very hard for me to bear. It's very hard to bear the suffering of countless mother sentient beings. All of them are experiencing unbearable physical suffering and mental pain in this life and in other lives. I find this unbearable. I have to liberate all these beings from their suffering. And so I said, but can I? And your answer should be no, not yet. I need to attain enlightenment. I need to attain enlightenment to free all beings from suffering. And breathe in through your nostrils, exhale through your mouth, and just let it all go. Come back to where you're sitting. And we're just going to wrap up now. So in terms of the summary of this verse, we're trying to cultivate this wishing love. And by doing so, deepen our compassion. And thereby be able to hold difficult people. Hold them as dear ones. To do that, we have to cultivate some empathy and compassion for others. And the thing that really ruins us is fear, aversion, anger, and which are all arising of the sense of egocentricity, self-preoccupation. And this whole thing is related to the advantages of cherishing others. If we can see the advantage of it, then we can do it. It's also related to this perfective joyous effort. It's like, strange, it was a great example of Miffy's story she gave. You know, imagine seeing someone like that being, oh, it's so great to see you. Right? And so you go, whoa, which is a sort of
Well,
natural response.
I'm going to be ready for the next time, because now I, like you were saying about using the delusion, now when I feel that recoiling
Yeah,
arise in my mind, I'm like, careful, now's my
yeah,
time.
that's right. Yeah. So here again, as this brief summary, we can see how this has all worked out. You can see verses 3 and 4 are both related to the exchange of self with others. So when we talk about exchanging, what we're exchanging is this view that where before I was really preoccupied with me, with myself and my needs, I'm going to change that around and become really concerned about your needs. So to do that, we've got to remember to do it. We've got to be vigilant to see that, is it me or other? If it's others, we've got to first be empathetic towards them, recollect their suffering and wish to put an end to it. And what will always stop us is egocentricity or self-preoccupation. It'll either produce fear, resentment, all the disturbing emotions come out of this egocentricity. So we've got to sort of concentrate the mind by remembering this, and then remember that whenever we meet difficult people, it's just time for joy, because it's very rare to meet them. No need to push them away, right? It's like, heck, I haven't had any problems today. Damn, I need someone problematic. You know? Because it's only upon them that I can develop myself. So if I meet someone, I've got to say, great to see you. Barbara, yep, you have a question?
I do have a question. In the scenario that you gave us to contemplate on, the couple that were shouting and there
Sure.
was a child involved.
Yeah,
I've witnessed similar things like that.
sure.
And what I go to is the self-cherishing of protecting my physical well-being.
Yeah.
And I don't know how to get beyond that.
Okay.
When people approach me, I go to being concerned about my physical
Sure.
being.
Yeah, that's great, Bob. Yes, and this is one of the deepest forms of attachment that we have, is to our physical body, towards our physical being. So the only way is to tackle that, Bob, is to actually look at this physical being, what we call the body, our body, and sort of examine to see, how does it actually exist? What am I actually attached to here? Because that, you have a view, you have an idea about yourself in relationship to the body. So yeah, the first thing I'd say, Barb, are you your body? Are you the body? No. Okay, so the body's not yours. Or is it yours? You're not the body, but it is yours, isn't it? Your body is your body. There we go. Yep, it's not Eddie's, it's mine. Barbara's, that's my body. There we go. Then we can have a look at that and go, okay, so what's your relationship here to my body? You know, you say, well, I'm the owner of it, I'm the possessor of it, I direct it. If I'm not the body, I'm the owner of it, aren't I? You are. And you can direct your body to do what you want it to. Would that be correct?
Correct.
Yeah. And at present, what's stopping is the mind, isn't it? A sort of attitude you have towards your body, this idea of cherishing this body as being yours. Then you can say, what is this actual body that I'm really cherishing? I don't want to be harmed. How does it actually exist? So you don't need to answer this question right now, but these are the sort of questions you need to ask yourself. Right? And you sort of go through it, and you look at it and go, oh my God, what am I actually cherishing here?
So Eddie, you're saying we've got to actually deconstruct if we're
That's
if
right.
we're automatically attached to our body or fearful for our physical safety, we've got to deconstruct, well, what is this body I'm fearful for?
That's right. That's right. And this is the practice of using your intelligence, your wisdom. But it's because you have a view. So you go, well, I need to deconstruct that view. I need to actually look at what do I actually think about this body? You know, like, what is this body that I'm so concerned about? And then you come back and like, and who am I that's actually so concerned? Who is this person that's really concerned about my body?
But Eddie, isn't the first thing we should be concerned about our actual physical safety of our body?
Well, we've always been concerned about that. We are naturally concerned about it. I'm not saying to not be concerned. I'm just asking you to sort of investigate what is the thing that you're actually concerned about. So we're not saying don't be concerned. That's not what we're saying. Yeah, we have to be concerned. We are concerned about our body, and that's good. But it's like, what's the body you're actually concerned about? Anyway, this is something to think about, to reflect upon, right?
Thank you, Eddie.
So this is great, Bob. So
it's a
just
lot
as you
for
got
me to
that, and
think
Miffy
about.
said you get the recoiling thing, there's our learning space right there. Right? So this is why we can say afflictions are very useful. They can be teachers to us. We can use them as a teaching tools, and we should. Well, look,
Thank you, Eddie. Thank you so much.
so just something to think about. I'm going to move on from this because we're just, like I said, we're just about out of time. We're over time. So what's your takeaway for today? What do you know of these verses, 3 and 4 of the 8 verses? You have these sort of tables, so you can go through and you can go, what should I not do and what should I do? And what are the relationships to wishing bodhicitta and engaging bodhicitta? And there's like a summary of the main points. So look, if you have any commentary at all, if you don't have one, just go online and plug in 8 verses of thought transformation and a commentary will pop up. So you can read a bit more in depth about it and get a more understanding. And you can always come back to the slides because they'll be up online. And next week, we'll look at 2 verses, verse 5 and 6. And these are like how to deepen love and compassion and how to cultivate patience. So we're here, we've all put effort in. I really appreciate you being here, trying to develop the mind in such a way. So I want us to dedicate the energy you've put into it, your willingness to sit here, to listen, to think. So due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the supreme jewel, bodhicitta, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. And as long as space endures, as long as sentient beings abide, may I too remain to dispel the sorrows of the world. And that's brought us to the end of our class. So I might have gone over a few minutes. I'm sorry about that. But I'm also glad that you're still here. So please, again, I request you, do your very best to stay alive. Try to cultivate the mind and bring about the sense of concern for others and wish to help them. And again, thank you for engaging in these classes. I'll see you again. Okay.
Thank you so much, Eddie.
Thank you, Eddie.
Thank you, Lou.
Thank you.
Thank you, Charlotte.
Thank you,
for
everyone.